I'm going to turn on the recordings just so people know that this is being recorded, so that people can, we can share this with anybody who might want to access this video in the future, and I'll be happy to send you a link to this video. So basically what we want to do today is give you a walkthrough of tips and best practices in your new role as an assistant and associate editor. And what we're going to do is going to give you the big picture. And so not everything is going to be specific to your role, but it's going to help you understand all the pieces that are moving together when we publish the journal. And so this is going to be pretty practical. But a couple things I want everybody to know, because we've all been on the author side, and if on Twitter, you know how frustrating it is for authors when you submit something and you wait months and months or sometimes years to get a response. And we know it's really important, and I think it's an ethical obligation of our journal that we provide an initial decision as soon as possible. And just so you know, these are our targets. These are not hard and fast, but there's certainly things that, these are benchmarks we try to measure ourselves against. And we try to provide an initial decision to any author who submits 90 days from submission. And we provide 5 weeks for peer review. Now, sometimes manuscripts might take a little bit longer, but that is our goal. And so just to understand that that's our basic target. And our other goal is to help our authors, not to decide what gets in and what gets out, although that is a part of our decision. So our goal is, regardless of the final decision, we want to make sure our authors feel like we gave them really good feedback that's going to be help them publish their research somewhere. And we think that's a very high value, and our goal is to make sure that our authors, although they might would prefer to be accepted, even if they don't get a decision that they prefer, we're going to help them be successful because they have invested time in writing this paper. And so we're in a position where, roughly speaking, if you need a heuristic, we are in a position where when we get about 500 manuscripts per year, it means we can only publish about 1 in 10 of those. It doesn't mean that we use that as our guideline, but it helps you heuristically to understand what that looks like. So let me just basically help you understand what the pipeline basically looks like, just as a guideline. Again, we're not asking you to, you have to reject X number, or we're not looking at that, because it might be possible that you receive a ton of high quality manuscripts and you just happen to accept more, and others of you might not. It just really depends, but basically to help you understand our pipeline. So Laura will get over 500 manuscripts a year and process those, and she and I will work together. And typically we only move about 250 of those, or about half of those, to our associate editors. Laura's job, just so you know, if you're an associate editor, is not to make an evaluation of the quality of the research of the manuscript. Her job is simply to see if the manuscript meets a basic checklist of our criteria where we think it merits review by an associate editor. Your job as an associate editor is to do that initial review of the merits of the manuscript for research, and we empower our associate editors to choose to decline to send a manuscript out for review. I really see that decision as one that can be very supportive to authors, because it doesn't help authors for us to take 90 days to give them a decision if really we don't feel like that manuscript has a chance of being successful. And so, but as associate editors, you have the first read. And as the first read, typically speaking, you will probably maybe choose, and maybe about 1 out of 3 manuscripts, to say, you know what, this is not worth asking reviewers to spend time on. I think there's some value to this. This is typically in the case where you might see some research that might look really good, but it might not be something that you think advances or really fits with our aim and scope. And we're going to go over some keywords in our aim and scope that you can use to help make these decisions. But you'll send these out, and typically when you send it out for review, we'll send about 150 manuscripts out for review, and we can accept about 1 in 3 of those as well. And we typically make the decision to do a revise and resubmit. Now, after we make that initial decision, our goal is really to work with those authors and then try to move that manuscript towards acceptance. There are times when the revisions are really, really major, and we may or may not be able to make the ultimate accept decision. But our goal is, if we provide a revise resubmit, in some ways we're providing a contract with the author that there's some specific things we want them to address. And if they successfully address those things, we will work with them in 1 round of review, or as many as needed, to help them be successful. And typically that results in about 48 manuscripts we can publish in any given year. The best guide you can have for what you're trying to make decisions on is on our website. And I just encourage you to really use these as guides. And I'm going to click here on aims and scope, and then I'll have to change my share so you can see my screen. so that you can see what I'm looking at here. So basically, with our aims and scope, you can see this is a carefully written kind of document that helps people know if they're a good fit for our journal, and also helps our editorial team know what we should be looking for. Let me highlight a couple keywords that are important for our senior editorial team to notice. These words right here: new and demonstratively significant advancement in research. Something can be high quality research, but it's not assessed to be something that really advances the field. And what are the ways in which we're looking to advance the field? So we're very mindful, and I know we have some experts like, I know Kayla has done some amazing work on this, as well as Christina on this. We are looking to be inclusive, and we're not simply looking to reproduce kind of hierarchies of power that determine what's publishable, what's valued as knowledge, and what's not. So the way we think about new and demonstratively significant are in these words at the bottom. Is it an under-researched aspect of the field? Is this something that hasn't been researched that's been looked at? Maybe the study isn't, maybe needs some development, but it's something that we really need to be thinking about. Oops, I have somebody just join us. Let me make sure to add them. Wonderful. Second, is this from a region, a country, a context, a population, or a perspective of which little is known already? We want to publish things that are relatively new and new these contexts. And then, is this an underutilized theory? Does it use a new perspective? And is it joining theory and research? And so the other thing I'd like to highlight as well is when we think about the Journal of International Students, and certainly this is where your editorial expertise will help us revise this aim and scope. We try to create an inclusive definition of international students. So certainly there's the traditional international student who might come from a middle class or wealthy family who makes the choice to cross a border for an education. But there are all kinds of new generations of international students. There's international students who are forced to migrate, who are not choosing to be enrolled at the institutions that they are, but they've been forced migration because they're refugees. There's certainly undocumented students, and there's other immigrant student populations. And there's also international students who may be attending private universities or be involved in distance and online programs that might not necessarily cross a border. And so the definition of international student, we want to make sure is clear to you, is inclusive of all of these things, and not just necessarily what might come typically to mind with an international, when we say the word international student. So the other thing you can look at that's helpful, it's on the slide, and we'll send you a copy of the slide, is what is our peer review process and what are our reviewer guidelines? The peer review process is helpful for associate editors. The reviewer guidelines are helpful for our assistant editors. And let me just highlight a few things about this. And I'm not going to go into great detail because you can look at this on the web. You can look again, we remind people, in the peer review process the 4 things that we call out in our aims and scope. And then we look at 5 dimensions of any manuscript. Is it significant? Is the review of the literature robust? How high quality is the research design for empirical articles? Does the discussion make connections between research, policy, and practice? We have a lot of practitioners who read our journal. They do care about this final section. And then finally, is the manuscript writing clear? I want to also be clear with this is when we work with authors whose native language is not English, it's very important that we consider that in our peer review process, that we don't let perceptions of poor style or poor syntax or grammar count against authors if we have any reason to believe that English may not be a native language. And so we always work with our authors, and our authors often tell us how supported they feel when we don't use that as a barrier to publication. So that's one caveat I would offer. We eventually make the decisions to decline. We either resubmit for major revisions, resubmit for minor revisions, or accept. And you can see our review process for our reviewer guidelines as well. These are the things assistant editors would draw on if they have any questions about how they should treat a manuscript. Certainly we want to begin with any conflicts of interest. If you have any reason to believe that you know who the author is or you're familiar, you need to declare that conflict of interest, and we'll find another person to review the research. It's important that we maintain the highest levels of ethics in peer review. And then we have very similar criteria. And then we have specific guidance in terms of comments to the authors. Again, to remind everybody, our goal is to provide feedback to the authors that helps them improve their work regardless of our final decision. So we try to frame our comments in ways that are going to help them develop their work regardless of our ultimate decision about the manuscript. And we outline what this looks like very in great detail in terms of using specific comments or suggestions and the ways that we frame our comments so that they understand specifically what we're asking and ideas we might have for improving the quality of the manuscript. You also can give confidential comments to editors. You can be just very frank with these comments. These are not going to be shared with the author. And then we provide some guidance in terms of if your recommendation is to decline, please explain your reasoning for declining. Don't if you're going to make that decision, and we provide some guidance there as well. I'm going to stop here and see if there's any comments in the comment box, and then I'll go ahead to the next section. We'll do a walkthrough. Okay, great. And there'll be some chances for you to give some feedback. So let me give you some best practices from our experience managing our submissions. So it's easy for this to be a 24/7 kind of job unless you set some boundaries. And so what I encourage you to do is pick one day a week, maybe 2 days a week, or maybe one day every 2 weeks when you know you're going to log into the system and you're just be consistent. And so that's really important to kind of set what's my time to do this, and to make sure you do it on a consistent basis. And I encourage you to try to do it at least once a week. You will get notifications from the journal. They all begin with bracket, JIS, close bracket. You might want to create an inbox rule so it doesn't clutter your inbox, and you can see what do I need to act on, when I decide to log in. It'll tell you like what are the emails I've received in the last few days from the journal that I can act on. Remember that associate editors have the option to decline a submission without sending it out for review. So you are empowered. The manuscripts do not go through me to you. They go directly from Laura, our managing editor, to our associate editors, which means you really are the first line of review, and you do have the authority to be able to make that decision. If you need to consult with me or Krishna, you of course are welcome to do that. Our goal and our target is to assign 1 assistant editor plus 2 reviewers. And that's our goal. It doesn't mean that can always be the case. If our assistant editors are full, we don't want to burden them if they're already reviewing manuscripts, but our goal will be to assign to 1 assistant editor and then 2 reviewers, so we can provide high quality feedback. Make sure you understand our time guidelines as well. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to identify what we might mean by a high quality reviewer in this context. Any discussions you want to create, we encourage you to create those within the system, not via email that's separate from that. That way we can kind of log a history of any discussions related to a manuscript and when decisions were made and what kind of issues were addressed. And then always, I hope the thing you walk away from this meeting with is please reach out to myself or Krishna anytime and CC Laura as the managing editor if you ever have any technical issues, you can't access something, or you just need to ask a question and you want some advice about a manuscript. Let me highlight some things quickly related to the timeline for the journal. And this is and you'll see this is in a copy of our editorial handbook that will help you know kind of just how to do your role. So our goal is to, after 7 days of submission, Laura's goal is to make a decision whether to provide an initial decline or assign it to one of our associate editors. Again, we think that's a very kind and ethical thing to do with our authors if it's in their best interest, because they might be under a lot of pressure to publish, to let them know that decision as soon as possible and encourage them. Usually we encourage alternative venues that we think they might consider, and they can take our advice or not. Within 14 days of submission, our goal is that the associate editor has reviewed it and has decided whether or not to send it out for peer review. And then at that point, reviewers have, you can assign reviewers. Reviewers have by default 5 weeks. I'll show you how you can add more time or take away time if you need when you assign reviews. And then our ultimate goal is 90 days after submission. And we do monitor globally, what our average time to make an initial decision. None of these are fixed in stone policies. There's no reason, we can sometimes need to go longer for very legitimate reasons. They're just basically targets and guidelines. And so don't be beholden to these, but just kind of know that we're doing all of this in service to our authors primarily, that we do that. Okay, so let me move back to the slides, and then we'll do a walkthrough in the system. So the Google Editorial Team Handbook that I just was on, if you do one thing, please bookmark this. This should be, and this is a constantly updated resource, but it's going to help you understand your how to use the system, but also the values that we want to use in the review process. As a member of our editorial team, if you have any ideas for improving this process that you think that would be more equitable and inclusive and represent the values of the journal, feel free to reach out to Krishna or I. We're very interested in making sure that we create systems that do that. There's 3 other things that are helpful to bookmark as well. The Open Journal system has an online user guide that's incredibly helpful. And then there's also a wonderful walkthrough tutorial set of videos that only take about 6 minutes each on YouTube that are great for review. And I really do encourage you to think about these 3 resources as well. The other thing I want to highlight that is useful in the system is if you log into our system, and I'm going to share our system here. If you log into our system, you can see I've signed in. I'm going to look at my dashboard to see what manuscripts are in. There's this wonderful button here called Help. Help is that user guide in context. If you're like, I don't know how to use the system, just simply click on Help, and it's going to let you know how can I do the different things that I'm trying to do in this context, and then you can search. You can even look at this nice table of contents to understand how you might need to do different things. The system, I think, is mostly pretty intuitive, but there might be some times that you feel like you need some help, and I wanted to point out the help feature that is, I think, useful. We're going to do a quick walkthrough right now, and this is a great time for Christina or Yiz to share their experience using the system, or other people that are familiar, and then if you're new, to ask questions, to say, wait, show me exactly how that works, so that you can see what it looks like from a manuscript being submitted all the way through making a decision. So I'm going to switch here quickly to my browser, and it's really hard because the slide looks just like my browser, so I have to find that. So here's my browser. I showed you that I've logged into the system. I've used my credentials. My list of my queue is going to be much longer than yours. Ideally, yours probably has 2 manuscripts and probably no more than 5 at any time. A couple of things I want to highlight about this. There's this filters button that's really helpful, especially when you're an associate editor kind of role. You can see what manuscripts are currently under review that you're managing, any manuscripts that are at the submission stage that need an initial decision, and then what manuscripts have moved on to things like copy editing, and we're working on publishing those manuscripts, okay? But what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to say that I know that I need to look at this manuscript here, manuscript 1840. Called Sample Title, Sample Subtitle by first name, F name, and last name, last. And our given name, family name is last. And so you can see here that if I go to the submission tab, here are the files the authors have uploaded. They have a cover letter that's written to me as an associate editor. There's a blinded manuscript they've said is blinded, and then they upload tables as a separate document. The first thing I'm going to want to do is download these. And the way you can download these is simply just click on it and it will automatically download the letter. You can read the cover letter and you will be able to read that, as well as read the blind manuscript. But let's say that you went ahead and you've decided that this manuscript, if you need to do any pre-review discussions, it's very simple. If you need to, you can add a discussion here. And if for some reason you need to send a message, you can do that under adding discussion, and that's true at every step of the way. But let's say you've decided that this manuscript is ready for review. You're going to click on this Send to Review button. The wonderful thing about the Send to Review button is it sends a notification to the author that lets them know that you have decided to send this out for review. As an author, you're probably so excited to get that, and you're glad when you get that relatively quickly, ideally in the first 14 weeks. We want them to know if we've decided to send it out for review. If for some reason you've decided not to send it out for review, all you do is you click Decline Submission, And you'll see that we have a pre-formatted email that is very kind and compassionate, but it just lets them know factually that we have decided not to move forward with their manuscript. And it does provide some venues. We provide a template for some possible venues for their work. And we do thank them for considering the journal. And all you need to do is click record the editorial decision, and it will clear the manuscript and then notify the author that it's not going to go under review. But let's send this manuscript to review. Now, one of the things I don't want to send to review is the cover letter, because that's something I don't want to be, that often has identifiable information about the authors. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And let's say I don't want to include that. And then I select the files I want to send to review, and I click send to review. Now I'm on the review tab. And you can see at the very top it says waiting for reviewers to be assigned. So this is my first job. Let me show you how you can go about selecting some reviewers. And I'm going to show you the advice that we are going to offer, that we offer in our team handbook. And we offer this advice under the Associate Editors tab, so that you can see how you might go about making this decision as well. And so you need to conduct a preliminary review of your submission, and then you need to either choose to decline or send it to review. You'll send at least 3 invitations. Remember, our ideal is 1 assistant editor, like Melissa, for example, and then 2 reviewers. Our goal with that is we know 1 person will provide a really high quality review that is really in line with our journal's values, and ideally 2 other reviewers will. We only require a minimum of 2 reports. The reason we want you to send it to 3 people is because if for some reason somebody drops out, there's not further delay for the author as you identify another reviewer. So ideally, we request 3 reports. Not only is that more information for the author, that makes sure that if somebody has something medical come up or they're unable to complete the review, for whatever reasons it might be, we can still make a decision on the manuscript without further delay for the authors. Then your next step is to search for registered reviewers. So one of the things I want to highlight about this is there's a couple things that you can do to identify high quality reviewers that even I've learned how to use in the system that are brand new to me, that are really helpful tools. One is you can look at the reviewer's star rating. Every review that is provided, we provide a rating of how quality that review was. You can look at how many reviews they've completed, if they've completed a lot or they're brand new. How long has it been since they've completed a review? If it's been too soon, we're going to overload our assistant editors and our reviewers if we keep asking them, review, review, review. So you can basically have, ideally they haven't reviewed in a while. There's been a nice break for them. And then also you can look at people who haven't reviewed in a long time, who are probably like, why don't you send me something to review? I'm ready to do that. You can use filters to be able to do that. And how many active reviews, and then generally how many days does it take for them to complete a review on average in our system? If it's going to, if they on average could take 120 days or 200 days, that's not a reviewer we want to invite if we want a timely decision, and we're going to be concerned about that. So the way you'll do that is you click Add Reviewer. Now, this is one of the tricks I want to show you in this webinar is to help you understand how to find these high quality reviewers relatively quickly. Now, the key thing is to click on filters. Filters are going to give you the information that I just was mentioning. So for example, how many days has it been since we've last assigned somebody a review? There's some time that we want to make sure that if somebody's done some work for us, we want to give them a little bit of a break. So let's say we want to make sure it's at least been 60 days since they've been assigned a review, because we don't want to overburden our reviewers. How many reviews have they completed? Now, in some ways, you could say, oh, Melissa, congratulations, 10 or more. Wow, you win the prize. 10 or more reviews right there, and a 5-star rating. No wonder she's an assistant editor. She's a superstar reviewer. But sometimes I want to know there's some balance here. So for example, Melissa would be a great choice for a high quality reviewer, and I think I'll select her in this example. But the other thing I'll point out is that sometimes you want to remember that we want to invite new people to our community. And if we always pick people who've reviewed for us in the past, then we're not going to invite new people to our community. So again, being inclusive means sometimes intentionally saying, I'm interested in people who've done 0 or more reviews, okay? And you want to be able to determine that. And then finally, go ahead, please.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
So if you look at Melissa's profile right there, it says that she's done 10, but why is there something that says never assigned?
I have no idea. If you can figure that out, yeah, you will solve the mystery of the universe.
I don't need to solve it. I was just asking, but okay. I was very curious about that.
I will solve the mystery. Yeah, but I'll show you another key. So when I see never assigned and I see 10, normally that's a reason I wouldn't assign somebody, right? But sometimes the more information where there's more information I can see is that Melissa currently, according to our system, has no reviews assigned, which actually does mean she's available. She's not busy working on something else.
I think I don't want to interrupt you, Chris, but I think that's the answer to your question, Christina. So if you look at the NAN with the little, like, the same symbol that's never assigned, I think it means that they don't have anything currently assigned, so there haven't been any days since they were assigned, if that makes sense. Like, they don't have an outstanding review.
Oh.
I think you just solved the mystery of the universe.
It's not intuitive, but I think that that's what that means.
That's awesome. And I'm really glad Christina shared a question, and feel free if you want to ask questions in the chat box as I walk through, because this is very interactive, and share questions and suggestions. And so you can see that Melissa, I didn't expect to make her an example, but she's a good example here. She's completed 10 reviews for us, and she's a great reviewer in the sense that she's actually pretty quick. She does it in relatively about 2 weeks, and we can see her reviewing interest as well. So since she's on the call and she'll get an email, I want her to know that that she's not really reviewing a manuscript called sample, but I'm going to go ahead and select her as a potential reviewer, because she is somebody I would like to review my manuscript. And you also see she has the keyword ASTED. That means she's an assistant editor. If you're searching for just assistant editors, you just type in ASTED. And you'll see that there is this nice pre-formatted email that's an invitation to review a new manuscript. And then there's some important dates. When do we want Melissa to respond by? When is this going to be due? Let me highlight a couple things that are best practices in this. One is, I think we all get way too many auto-generated emails, and sometimes it doesn't feel like we're getting invitations from real human beings. A best practice for me would simply just say, Melissa, I know you have reviewed for us, and have done a great job. This manuscript is about community colleges and social networks. Hope you can review. It doesn't, she might still turn us down. And sometimes I write in this comment, like, I know you might be busy at this time, but I try to personalize it just a little bit. It just lets that person know that it wasn't like some computer algorithm that sent them the email, that a real human being, and your signature is going to be automatically generated at the bottom based on your bio that is in your profile. And then there's, of course, an abstract. Now, here's 2 other things to highlight when you assign a manuscript that are really important. By default, reviewers have 7 days to respond to review. You can change that anytime. So right now, Melissa has to respond by the 23rd. If for some reason I wanted to extend that, let's say it's a religious holiday or a social holiday or a national holiday, we don't want to get an invitation to say, will you let me know on Christmas Eve if you can review this or not? That's not necessarily something that reviewers like to get. Or if there's a special religious holiday, and it would conflict with somebody's calendar. And so you can adjust that. The thing that you tend to adjust more is this 5 weeks to review. So sometimes you might need to, for different reasons, you can extend that to 6 weeks, and other reasons you might say, I'd like this in 4 weeks or less. So realize you can adjust that at any time. And then finally, at the very bottom, the review form will always be research articles, new manuscript, when it's a new manuscript. If you get a revised resubmit, what you need to do is go to this next one, research articles, revised manuscript. It's a slightly different form, but what this is going to do. So when I click add reviewer, that means Melissa is going to get an email in her box called invitation to review. And then I'm going to get this message in the system here that a request has been sent, and then I know the response is due by 1/23, and it'll let me know if Melissa is late in choosing to accept or decline this manuscript. And knowing Melissa right now, she's checking her email, she's accepting this invitation, and when I refresh the screen, we'll already know she's accepted the invitation and she's completed the review probably before this webinar is over. And then you can simply add reviewers from here. So the next thing that's helpful in doing this is you can search by key terms. Like, for example, some people have talked about they have an expert in international student mobility. You can see we have a lot of reviewers that have listed this as a keyword. It searches both their bios and it searches the keywords that our reviewers have listed. And so you realize you can use these keyword searches to really get to know people. If you wanted to, for example, Suzanne Beach is currently reviewing for us, and I can see a little bit from her profile and her reviewing interest. We don't have a biography for her, so I know probably not to give it to Suzanne, but I can select people based on keywords. And sometimes I want to highlight people to people. Sometimes the keywords are going to be related to the content of the article, and sometimes the keywords are going to be related to the methodology of the article, ideally both. But sometimes you definitely need somebody who's a content expert who may not be as familiar with the methodology or epistemology the author is using. And sometimes you really are searching for people who have entered certain perspectives, epistemologies, or methodologies as their expertise. Qualitative is a good example of something that I sometimes type in. Has this person say that they look at qualitative research? I want to make sure that they've done that. If I'm looking for somebody who knows something about regression, I can use keywords. Not everybody's profiles are fully filled out, and so often it's good to dig in a little bit into the bios and profiles to see what the authors have said about, or what our potential reviewers have said about themselves. And again, remind yourself, we want to encourage people who have high ratings, certainly, but we also want to be inclusive. And so if we ignore people who've never done a review, or who then we don't grow our community, and we want to give our authors an opportunity, or our reviewers an opportunity to be a part of our community. So I'm going to stop right there, and then I'm going to just kind of open it up for any questions and answers. I see Stephanie has a question. Since associate editors are assigning reviews to 3 individuals, when at least 2 come in, is the 3rd individual then relieved? And how do we do this in the same portal? That's a great question. So, so we can easily add three people here. And then what you can do is, what I've tried to do is, if I have 3 people that have all accepted a manuscript and they're all pretty much working on time, then I wait till all 3 people respond, because I don't want that last person to do all this work. Maybe they're thinking about the article and they just haven't written up the review and sent it in, to all of a sudden get this notification that I don't need the review anymore. So I pretty much wait until the deadline, that to make sure all 3 people have the deadline that they were originally requested. Realize that it's 5 weeks from the invitation, and so there might be a deadline, today, or there might be a deadline that is slightly different for each reviewer, because they all have 5 weeks from whenever they were initially invited to review. You can also, and this is why I think it's a great question, at any time, let's say one of your reviewers says, oh, I had this medical emergency, I have this stressful situation in my work, can you please give me an extension? It's very simple to basically give them extension and change the date of when something's due. That prevents kind of an awkward situation where the system says, well, you haven't submitted your review is late, and somebody says, well, I told you I had a major surgery scheduled and I'm going to be out for 2 weeks. We don't want to do that. And then to Stephanie's point, there are times that reviewers don't respond. This is something that is common to a lot of journals, and certainly we're not immune to that. And there's a lot of sometimes valid reasons, and sometimes there's just reasons because people are not they're not living up to their commitments. But regardless of the reason, sometimes you need to unassign a reviewer, and it's actually very nice, because you click unassign reviewer. Let's say Melissa is not being responsive for whatever reason, and we have a very nice email to let Melissa know that she's been unassigned. You don't have to send it, because you can say, I don't want to notify Melissa, I just want to take her off the system. But sometimes it's good just to let people know, like, I've invited you, I haven't heard back from you. So just to let you know, I'm just going to cancel the invitation for now, and I hope to work with you in the future. It's a polite way to basically say, I'm going to move on to somebody who can be more responsive, because I need a response. There are, I see Ming is, Dr. Lee is asking a question. Is there a policy for submissions from assistant editors and associate editors? If the question is meant to say is, if we know the identity of, for example, if somebody who's on this call submits something as an author, the system will blind them from everything. They won't be able to access any information about their submission that is confidential and a part of the blind peer review. And then in any case, outside of the editors, this is where our conflict of interest policy comes into play, and you can look at that online. For example, let's say Kayla and Christina are good friends, or at least professional colleagues, And Kayla has now been assigned to a manuscript that she knows the identity of Christina, and Christina is an associate editor. She could feel pressure to, not want to offend and accept that. It's very common. It's one of the challenges of the peer review process, one of the criticisms. So in that case, we just follow our ethical guidelines, and Kayla would simply communicate, I'm not able to do this at this time. I have a conflict of interest. It's the first thing we want you to look at. But all of you are here because you probably published something in our journal, or you've been a part of that. So it does happen, and for the most part, we've never had any issues with people. We're able to protect those identities pretty well. Of course, that's when ironic things happen in peer review, when people comment back, well, you should really read the work of Melissa Watley. She's an expert on social network analysis, and it was Melissa's paper or something like that. So that can happen sometimes as well. As you know, if you've ever followed Twitter, crazy peer review comments on Twitter.
Can I hop in for a second, Chris?
Absolutely.
So as far as assigning reviewers, I'll be really honest, Stephanie, and for everybody else, is that I probably get more reviewers who don't submit stuff than I do get everybody on time and all three that I ask, to be very honest. So I've never had to unassign a reviewer, or I've never had felt like, oh, I should get rid of the third one because I had the two or whatever. So if I do get all three come in, which is actually very rare, I give that feedback, right? That's just more feedback for the author. I've also had to do things where, and Chris, you might want to show people, is that I've had to send follow-up emails to the reviewer and say, hey, as a reminder, your review is due. Hey, as a reminder, your review is due. Please submit that and everything. And so there's like those little email options, and I've definitely had to use that before in the past. One question, Chris, is that I know that when I read through the Google Doc, it says that all reviewers must have a PhD. And I know that as I've gone through there, there's many people in there without a doctorate. What has been what we do?
That's a great question. So, this is where, and I'll let Krishna share about this. So we have, this is a part of our reviewer quality enhancement initiative as well. We've been looking at different things about our reviewers. Let me tell you at least where I'm coming from, but then maybe Krishna can add his perspective if there's anything I don't share. I have no problem at all, and I actually think it's a good experience for us to invite PhD candidates or people that are high quality in PhD programs. For example, Zach is a great example of that. He is one of our best reviewers, and he does a fantastic job. And I believe he's defending his dissertation this semester, and that's how he's joining our team as an assistant editor. I think that's really valuable. And sometimes what I would encourage is people send that person out as a fourth reviewer. It's great experience for the PhD student, but it also doesn't tie you to a doctoral candidate serving as a primary reviewer. So that's my recommendation. So I think I might need to clear up our guidelines. I think we've been working on that just because we don't want to be in a situation where we send the 3 invitations out and we aren't noticing it, but 3 people don't have PhDs. And then all of a sudden we're not providing our high quality feedback. So I was going to mention that we should encourage PhD students maybe as a fourth reviewer. So I would still send that invitation, but make sure you have 2 other people that you're relying on. There's nothing that says you can only send it out to 3. A couple things I want to highlight that Christina pointed out, but then maybe Christina, I'll let you follow up if you have other comments from your experience, or same with Leaf. If you for some reason Melissa is overdue now, you might notice I changed her due date so she would be overdue, so I could point this out. All I need to do is click send reminder, and it creates this automatic email that's just going to be a friendly reminder to our reviewer that they need to complete their assignment. If I want to be generous, it's very simple to go in here and say edit and say, you know what, I need to be generous, and I need to provide an extension. I can edit that and then send a reminder. And when I click send a reminder, it will document that in the system as a part of the editorial history. I can also just email the reviewer if I don't want to do something pre-formatted. I want to just talk to Melissa and say something. And then finally, when I get the review from the reviewer, this is my side as an associate editor. Typically, this would already be filled out. Let's say Melissa did this. She would have notes and comments that would typically be here. And then my job as an associate editor is to provide a rating. And I want to be clear that we're not rating people, and no, we're not trying to do that. But what we're generally trying to say is, was this review high quality? And not all of us can give high quality reviews every single time, okay? But it is helpful to make sure if somebody hasn't done a good job, to make sure that we indicate that so future associate editors don't assign it to somebody who ends up either saying inappropriate comments or sometimes offensive comments, I would say, that would be inappropriate to send to an author. That does happen rarely, but on occasion. The other would be is the person doesn't provide a kind of an in-depth kind of look at the manuscripts. There's just some superficial, maybe recommendations that aren't really looking at the manuscript's quality. And then you can provide some kind of rating. I'm going to not hurt Melissa's rating here, give her 5 stars. And then the other thing is a best practice is I always thank our reviewers. And this shows up after I've reviewed Melissa's comments, and I always click thank you. For me, peer review is unpaid labor, and the payment is at least acknowledgement that we can provide. So again, typically I would personalize it. You know, thanks so much, Melissa. I would say something personal. Great to see you at ASH. You know, at ASH, and then click thank reviewer, and this email would be sent, and that would go forward. So, KS, did you have a comment? How about anybody else, or current editors or new folks, anything you would like to see? Hopefully this is helpful. And I'm trying to do things that are more tips and tricks as opposed to just how the system works. Yes, Masha mentions, thank you for the individual thank you letter. It's very useful. And she mentions also it's useful for our tenure promotion files. Krishna can attest to this. A number of our scholars, especially in non-US context, but certainly in US context as well, do print these letters as a part of their promotion and review because we are listed in Scopus, often a requirement to be considered publishing in a high quality journal, as well as other indicators of legitimacy. A letter that comes from us becomes a part of someone's review file, and these are very important. I'll mention later, we've started a new initiative. Well, we've had this initiative now for several years, but we give out editor choice awards every year, especially for our scholars, our reviewers that are doing, you know, unpaid labor, but certainly recognizing them with an award so that they can, again, put that in their promotion tenure files. Hopefully that is valuable to them. That's our motivation for doing that. Because we often were asked to send paper copies or send certified professional letters that would certify that they received a certain award and the criteria that they met. And I think that's very important, so that can be, that's a way the journal can serve our team and our reviewers.
And Chris, I also would like to add that many colleagues, the reviewers or even authors, they frequently request letters to submit for their immigration purpose. Those who are applying for permanent residency or those 10 areas. So associate editors, please be prepared that you will be receiving some of these invitations from our colleagues to evaluate their portfolio and provide a letter of recommendation, which is also part of their involvement, commitment to the journal. Thank you, Chris.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, and so let me highlight a couple other things as well. This is the walkthrough, and I think the biggest thing I would say is don't hesitate to email me and Krishna whatever problem you might have. Recently, one of our associate editors was saying, I'm having a hard time logging into the system, and I was able to fix it right away. You're not bothering us. We're very glad to help you. And so don't hesitate to reach out. And we're here to support you on technical matters, but also if you notice anything about the journal, if you notice something about our process, to say, yeah, we do it this way. We should think about this because that might be a more equitable process based on what you know. And please suggest that to us. We're here to listen to you, not just tell you what we're currently doing. Our best ideas have always come from people noticing things we could be doing that would reflect our values better. So a couple of things, and I'm so glad Krishna is here because he actually is the expert on a lot of these strategic goals and initiatives. He has an imagination and a vision that is as big as the universe, I think, frankly. And so I'm going to let him speak about some of these initiatives. If he doesn't mind, I'll put him on the spot. But one thing I want to highlight to everybody here is we are open access, and open access is more than just being free downloads. That means we're powered 100% by volunteers. We don't charge our authors any fees. It's the most common question we get as editors of the journal is there a fee? The answer is no. And the reason there's not a fee isn't because everything we do doesn't cost money. It's because we have a volunteer who does it. And so we have people who volunteer to be copy editors, layout editors, people all over the journal, social media coordinators. Typically, that would be something you would contract for. This also means something that's hugely important for me, at least, and I would imagine for you. This means our research is accessible to scholars and universities worldwide. They're not buying gigantically expensive subscriptions from large, for-profit corporate entities that are publishing research. And you're no longer going to have to tweet, you get the first 50 copies of this research for free. Why not 51 and beyond? The reason is because there is money to be made. Doesn't mean the author can't send you a copy for free. That's certainly legitimate, but it means that we want to make sure our research is accessible to people around the world. And not every university library can afford a subscription to the top journals. In fact, most university libraries cannot afford that subscription, which means we're a source of knowledge that won't be. So just know that that's a really important part. Krishna is not paid. I am not paid in my role. Sometimes that's true for editors. Everything that we do is completely voluntary on our time. The money that we do generate, and we're supported by Old Dominion, is used for printing the print issues and then other things that are strategic initiatives. We are a part of a network of journals that is a part of the Star Scholars Network that Krishna and I both helped initiate. And so that also includes the Journal of Comparative International Higher Education that Rosalind Rabi oversees. That's a part of CIS's Higher Education SIG. We're proud that we have authors from around the world and reviewers from around the world, and we constantly are working to diversify those reviewers. And so if you're familiar with reviewers that are in contexts that we don't have reviewers from, please help us recruit reviewers. It's usually a great situation. Couple things, and then I'm going to turn over some of these initiatives to Krishna to describe. We're always expanding our global network of authors, scholars, and leaders. We're trying to develop a high quality system. Remember, everything's for free. And so the open journal system is hosted it's for free. But we're trying to make sure it is like top notch. You may not be aware, but if we were to go with a paid, even the cheapest version of a paid system, it's about $2,000 a month, which means it's $24,000 a year simply to publish. That's not even manuscript review system. So the cost of hosting a journal it creates a great barrier. And so we try to have a great system. We also, number 4 is important. We do care about mentoring emerging scholars, and that's been our attitude. I would imagine a lot of people who publish with us have felt that they've gotten a genuine feedback and support from us. And we also want to do all the things that good journals do: impact, which means citations; speed, which means we want authors to get a timely decision; and then reach, which means we want if you publish in our journal, we want people to discover it so they cite it, and then it benefits everybody. So Krishna, do you want to share about the 10th anniversary?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Yes. So first thing, I truly appreciate Chris Glass for taking a lead role, and also his university department for this financial support. Yes, it costs a lot to produce high quality manuscript and also help the authors. One of the initiative is the 2020 is our 10th years of publications. So we have a large number of the scholar expert in the field have already agreed to write the special article for the special issues, and we are also partnering with the CIES in our upcoming conference in the March. So we'll have a table for that, and we'll be having a sort of networking with that. And also, as a part of the 10th anniversary, we are also having the special issues in non-English edition. Probably you have noticed our Chinese edition, everything in Chinese, with the English abstract in both English and Chinese, and entire manuscript in Chinese. So that's there. And also, I'd like to request you, if you have your institution, your department is willing to support us, please let us know. We'd like to increase our network of the supporters so that we can, grow and reach out to many millions of authors from Global South and everywhere. This is also one of our goal that we support many emerging authors from Global South and elsewhere. That's there. So all 4 issues of 2020 will include features article of the 10th anniversary. And here is a list of our colleagues who have already expressed their interest to write, contribute an article for us, including from Chronicle of Higher Ed, Corinne, and many other well-established expert in the field. That's there. So Chris Glass has mentioned earlier that we have been providing the Best Reviewers Award, and here is our special issues of the year that includes 10 wonderful articles. And I am so much surprised that number of downloads that we receive in a week. It's not even been a week that we have uploaded these articles, that majority of the articles are downloaded more than 90 times, which is amazing. And I've been receiving at least 5 to 10 emails every week about this wonderful initiative. Many of these authors from Chinese speaking countries, including from Singapore, China, and other part of the East Asia. So, and these are 10 articles that are well written by the wonderful colleagues who have doctorate or who have been working with many other emerging scholars. So probably we did the best job selecting the right type of articles focusing on international students in China. We have a similar initiative for the special edition from Rasa in Russian language. That's something we are working on. Then the Chris Glass and the team, has also done a wonderful job to, categorizing the articles by the region or the topics. These are the thematic topics. If you look at the special topics, the collection is so much wonderful. This is something we can guide our graduate students if they are writing their theses or dissertations on international students. Look into the subtopics, the sub themes. That's something helpful. And also I'm closely looking into the track record that sent by our vendor, Eric. Eric has last week, emailed us that the number of downloads. So Eric is one of the initiative from the Department of Education, the State Department of Education. So in the next slide, you see, our another special issues coming from all the way from University of British Columbia, and a great colleague of ours putting together is a part of our grant. She has a summer grant, and Sharon has put together some manuscript for the special issues looking into internationalization initiatives and the role of international students. So we are very excited to bring a new initiative. And probably also you saw that we have a book project with Taylor and Francis. We have partnered with them. We are planning to have at least 3 to 5 books every year around the issue of global student mobility. Then also we also have a great panel, great team of the advisory board. These advisors are at least, have published 1 or 2 books in the field. They are also our senior advisors. They also contribute writing essays for the journals, and also they attend at least 2 advisory board meetings in the fall and spring of every year. So we have amazing colleagues. Chris, do you want to also?
Yeah, you did a great job. The other thing I'd like to highlight, and we share this with our board, and we save it to last, I think it's important to mention, but I want you to know it's not our driving thing that's driving our decisions. I don't think we're trying to become, number one, but we're trying to live out a certain set of values. But we do want to be mindful of things that do matter in terms of legitimacy. But I do want to highlight a couple of things. Our impact factor is equal to that of Teachers College Record, which I think you would say is a very high quality journal published out of Columbia University in New York. And then the number of citations we receive each year on Google Scholar, we are tied with the Review of Higher Education. That's the official journal of ASH for the number of average citations of our articles every year. And that's a very high quality journal. And so just to highlight is we're certainly not in any kind of race with other people, and but we do think it's important at least to make sure that we're mindful of doing things that matter. And we have a lot of flexibility to do that. We are moving to APA 7. We've already met with our copy editor team related to that. Most of the changes in APA 7 are quite positive, I would imagine, from our field, especially in regarding to bias-free language, which can enter into our field. And many of the changes relate much more to that than it is particular types of formatting as well. Future directions and opportunities. This is just a chance for you to give some feedback. I already highlighted some things related to our aims and scope, ways in which we're trying to be inclusive of different types of international students by mentioning refugee populations and undocumented students, as well as high school students that might be globally mobile. There's more and more of students that are high school students that are mobile as well, and focused on under-researched aspects of the field. But at this time, I'm going to stop, and we'll stop and see if you have any questions for us. They could be practical questions about how to use the system, or just kind of more questions about the strategic directions we discussed, or any kind of just general feedback, comment, and ideas that you would just want to offer as a comment.
I think considering, our short amount of time, just for 10 years or less, the amount of scholarship we produce and the amount of support we receive from wonderful colleagues like all of you is so huge. And it looks like we can build a community of scholar if we delegate, if we focus on something that we want to do. So that's amazing. And Chris, thank you always for taking a lead role. And also I like to take this moment to congratulate him for the new position as an editor-in-chief. And we are very proud of you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And thank you to all the members of this team. I think when I saw the applications, we did not know what was going to happen when we opened up our applications. And to even let you know that I reached out, I specifically went through our reviewer list, and Krishna and I both reviewed each name line by line, and we looked to invite scholars from around the world very purposefully to make sure to strategically reach out, not just to people who've done a good job, but if we were looking to expand the diversity of our team, who would we reach out to that may not immediately come to mind? Because I know some of you from the conferences I attend, but there's other conferences that we don't, and we specifically reached out. But when we saw the applications from you, we were just absolutely thrilled to see all the people that applied, and think you bring so much to the journal. And I think we view this pretty much as the beginning of a conversation and relationship. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. We can wrap up today's meeting if you need, but if for some reason you want to stick around or offer any final comments, you can do that. But if you have other commitments, I would imagine a faculty member at the beginning of the academic year is probably very busy. So if you have those commitments, just know that we thank you for coming today, and please reach out to us anytime. Hopefully you're leaving this session with some practical knowledge about our goals, some practical knowledge about how to use the system, but also some broader knowledge about what our strategic directions are and how you might be able to contribute to that. And we thank you for your service, and I hope you have a wonderful day. So feel free to log off if you need, and if you want to stay on and offer any final comments to me and Krishna, we will stay on the line. But thank you, Zach, for coming. I see Stephanie commented. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to working with you. So thank you, everyone. We will see you soon.
Thank you so much. And also, colleague, feel free to email us regarding the non-English edition as well, because we continue publishing full regular issues of the journals, as well as maybe one or two non-English editions, depending on the feedback from the colleagues. So please, for new ideas, we are very, very welcome for any new ideas you have, or suggestion, comment, feedback for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.